All right. Awesome. So I guess we're gonna kickstart our panel. So just as a means of a brief introduction, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Alejandro Saucedo. I am the chairman at the Institute for Ethical AI and Machine Learning. We are a think tank based in the UK that focuses on building frameworks and standards for data and machine learning. We released a framework this week on the machine learning principles, which you can find at ethical.institute. That's the website. And today, I'm quite excited. We have a really interesting set of panelists. We're going to be discussing about the impact of big data and AI on surveillance and data collection. We're going to be delving into three main topics from an applied technology perspective. This will be on privacy, regulation, and surveillance. And this is going to be quite a good conversation. I'm keen to learn from all of our speakers. So before we kickstart, I would like each of our panelists to introduce themselves briefly. So I don't know, maybe we can start with you, Anna.
Hello. Oh, fantastic works. Awesome. Hi. I'm Anna. I come from About You. I'm responsible for basically the checkout order processing there. I work as a product owner, having switched basically from the development about 4 years ago. And I'm really excited about this talk as well.
My name is Dittrich. I'm a professor at Saarland University. I have 20 years experience in data management, in particular large-scale data management. And since 3 days ago, I'm also co-founder of a data science consulting company.
Hi, moin moin. My name is Gerhard Giese. I work for Akamai Technologies. I've been working for them for 8 years. I work in the security area. Have been working in the security business for over 20 years. And yes, it's going to be interesting.
My name is Karin Patenge. I work for ARC as a I'm sorry, I just have to go back. So I work for ARC as a solution engineer for quite a few years, and I'm focusing also on data management technologies and those kind of things.
Awesome. So why don't we put our hands together and give a round of applause to our panelists for getting started. Amazing. So let's start with privacy, and I guess privacy, internet privacy more specifically, is a very broad term. I've seen it defined as a broad term that refers to protection and control towards sensitive and personal data. So, and I would like to ask you from, about you, a B2C company. From that perspective, do you agree with this definition of privacy? And do you think privacy is important? Or should we just not care about privacy if we don't have anything to hide?
Can I have your credit card number? Yes. Oh, wow. Christ. No. So to respond to basically the question, is privacy something that we care about or that I personally also care about? Yes, definitely. And I think it's fundamental. And it's something that we have to, looking at the technological development of today, continue to reevaluate and revise where our own personal borders of what is privacy is, but also what technological barriers we have to put to maintain a level of privacy. Both basically from the most malicious viewpoint, as in making sure that our data, our customers' data is not made public in any way, but also, and now I've lost my thread, unfortunately. Fuck it. Okay, full stop right now.
Thank you very much. And I guess trading off on that, you mentioned some very interesting points, and I would like to tap on specifically on the security side. So Gerd, could you tell us a bit more from a security perspective, seeing this in industry? What are some of the challenges to ensure privacy? And has big data and the space of AI, machine learning changed the things at all?
Well, to state the obvious, of course it has. Well, when you think about privacy overall, I mean, the first problem that we have in an international word is to actually come to sense is what do we define as privacy. I think this is not something that's so crystal clear when you go over borders. You will see that an American company will address privacy completely different than a purely German company. And an American company in Germany will face big obstacles when talking to people at the BSI, for example, who will tell them a completely different story about privacy, which they might have never heard before. And I mean, we can see all of this right now with GDPR and DSGVO, where a lot of, I can sort of feel the tension rising in this room. Yes, it's terrible sometimes, and yes, we've all had these tons of emails coming to us. We can't tell you anything anymore because GDPR forces us to renegotiate. I personally see this as a good thing. We have such a big amount of data floating out there. We don't have clear understanding what security in the sense of PII actually means and what privacy actually is. So we have to come to senses first. We have to find common ground. And so stepping back and then saying, what's the purpose of collecting data? Instead of just collecting data is a first step. And this is actually what these prerequisites are asking from us.
Awesome. That's a very, very good point. And we're going to touch upon GDPR as well, because that's an interesting one. And you mentioned something very interesting, which is that, different countries would approach privacy in a different way. So I guess, this would be a question to Jens. I'll be quite interested from a technological perspective. You have a lot of insight when it comes to databases, big data systems like Hadoop, and now that you have the AI company consultancy, there's a lot of toolboxes that are arising. One of the ones that I'm personally very interested is differential privacy. But taking a step back from this country or industry specific perspective of privacy, what are some of the best practices from a technology perspective that you can approach as an engineer when developing the systems, and what are some technologies out there that you can use?
Okay, so best practices definitely are, first thing is make people aware how easy you can break privacy of data sets. That's exactly at the heart of join processing. Any joins in the database, join meaning you combine multiple data sets. It's a fantastic tool to break privacy or to de-anonymize a data set, and people are often not aware about that. So there were wild claims out there in the media, on the internet, oh, we anonymized our data set and now nothing will happen. There were some disasters happened afterwards, users got identified. So simply forget about that you can anonymize the data set, it doesn't work, full stop. And then, the one thing you can do is, of course, access controllers, make sure it will never leak. And if there's one firewall, better make a second or a third. Make it a physical island. Don't connect the machine to the internet if it's really sensitive data. And then you have people have to break in physically into the room, like in Mission Impossible. It's a different barrier than going via the internet. And the other is differential privacy, put some noise on the data. That helps to a certain degree. So I'm not a security researcher. I can't tell you this is 100% sure. Nothing is 100% safe and secure. Yeah? But that's what I hear from the security people. Differential privacy is the only thing that seems to help in that regard.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's an interesting one you mentioned. I remember there was one of the tech giants, I don't know if it was Airbnb, I don't want to mention it's that one, and it wasn't, but that they released an open data set with... Oh, was it AOL? Oh, right. So they released the anonymized data set, and then people were just finding the people using other, cross data sets. So yes, that's a key point, always making sure that you're conscious that there's not 100% of a solution. And I guess, I would like to still touch upon the practical perspective. And Karin, I think from a solution engineering perspective, I would be quite keen on, hearing maybe some of the thoughts that you have on what are some of the main challenges and difficulties that, you've encountered when trying to, make sure there is privacy in some of the systems that you architect or implement. What are some best practices that you would also recommend to the audience?
I think there's always the challenge that on one hand you want to have as much data as possible, as much you can get hands-on, and because you want to analyze data and you want to get answers to your questions, and on the other hand to have just the data you need. And I think there has to be a good balance to define what kind of data you need. And then, of course, you have to make sure that it's transparent, the data you're working with, what they contain, which of the data are sensitive data, and of course, what kind of security measures you apply to these data. And this is what the people here on the panel already told us before. There are certain things you can do, but as a private person, I would say that we all have to start with ourselves. So what kind of data we give publicly available to everybody else, I think we have to start.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And I guess chatting with a few data protection officers, it has been quite interesting to see that large part of security breaches are actually because Joe over there sent the email to the wrong person, right? With the data of, like, I don't know, maybe a patient or something like that. So I think having the right processes around the data, I think that's a very, very good point. So I guess now taking the fun one level up, moving to regulation and more specifically GDPR. So I guess I want to ask our audience. I want to see hands up for the people that have read all of the GDPR announcements before clicking accept. So maybe raise your hand. So yeah, that's about like 0% plus a maybe. So I guess, yeah. So I mean, I would like to open, specifically first again from a B2C perspective. What are your thoughts, Anna, in GDPR, in how it provides security to the users and the impact that it has on businesses? Do you think GDPR is the ultimate solution?
To me, it sounds like everyone is passing around the micro like a hot potato, right? No one wants to answer currently.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the question again?
So from working in a B2C company that deals with personal user data, what is your perspective on GDPR, both for protecting the user and the impact it has in the business?
As a concept, I'm a big fan of the GDPR. I think the more control we gain as consumers over our data, the better. The more transparency there is of where our data is stored, where it is traded, where it diffuses itself through the system, the better. But at least from my perspective, I think that kind of like jives with the question you just posed, is we've become, as consumers, completely desensitized to the whole process. And the further basically the consumer goes away from the internet savvy crowd, and that is the About You consumer in general, the less understanding basically of what it is there. And so I think we've kind of like filled half of the job by improving the situation. It's definitely not an end-all solution basically to the problem, but the fact that there's still so much misunderstanding or unknowns about what data protection and privacy is and what rights the consumers actually have in that point. I think that's the other part. Although honestly, someone will probably kill me if we get some more requests for data excerpts and transparency.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's really good. That's really good. Well, Gerd, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I actually like to pick up on what you Anna, and you, Karin, said before. I mean, it's from the personal standpoint. I'm really a big fan. I think it was about time that we had some clear definition of what PII and privacy actually means. However, the question is, how clear was the definition? If you look at how different companies read the GDPR requirements, I can see it from my company's perspective, because we get information from other companies saying like, we have just understood that you can no longer store this and that from our customers, so you have to delete it instantaneously. And we're like, no, we don't. The thing is, as regulations are, it's always written slightly fuzzy just in order to also keep up to date for a long time, instead of when you do it too clearly, it will be obsolete within less than a year. So therefore, this fuzziness is also a big problem, which you can also read if you actually do read the GDPR emails that you're getting. Some of them go a little step further and say, if you don't reply to this, we're going to continue sending you something, which is actually not the way GDPR works, but okay. And the others are basically saying, even this email that we're sending you now, we're no longer allowed to send, which is also rubbish. So it's more of getting a joint understanding. We're just starting with this. So this is the first time Europe has actually done this and stepped forward. And as I said before, American companies are all like, ooh, what is this? This is all dangerous, bad stuff is coming our way. And yes, it should be. It's the need to know principle. It's the question, why do I have to give my address and my date of birth to a free Wi-Fi that I want to connect to? Maybe I don't want to connect to it. As well as the other side, being sensible of what kind of data should we actually store, because we have to be careful to use the right amount of security for that data.
No, that's a very good point, and I think consent is such an abstract perspective, and that's what GDPR is built on, right? Like the consent, and I think there's been some examples where somebody saying, yes, I consent for you storing my videos, that may be okay, but they may not be consenting to the metadata that can be extracted from the videos, right? Like the potential synthetic generation of your voice, of your face, the emotions, etc., etc. So I guess one thing that I would be quite interested, Jens, from your perspective, given that you have been dealing with a lot of big data systems and now a lot of machine learning implementations, or now that you're going to start jumping in that area. What are your thoughts on GDPR and more generally regulation on allowing AI to just be continuously developed and improved? And by AI is just machine learning implementations of automation, like end-to-end automation. Do you think it's going to help companies that are doing that sort of thing, or is going to actually stop them from being able to improve? Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a big discussion going on also with this AI race between the US and China. And we Europeans, we believe we are part of the race. Not so sure. I mean, sorry. I like to be honest here and there, and the panel is a perfect place for being honest. And maybe you read about China that did investments in the order of billions. They announced that half a year back, and now a couple of days back I read in Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung, now they are up to 1,000 billion euros, so investing into just AI, getting AI because they want to win the race against the US. And there's a huge difference between China and the rest of the world, not so much with respect to the US, but in particular with Europe and GDPR. In China, you get access to all kinds of data. Yeah? Privacy basically doesn't exist. They have this social surveillance system like George Orwell, 1984, the wet dream of George Orwell, actually, what's happening there. And that's pretty bad for society in China, but it's fantastic for AI research. It's super fantastic where you get access to all kinds of data. And with GDPR, it will get more and more difficult to get access to the data. And that's a problem, because to build a really good system in the end, what wins is not the algorithm, it's the data. There's a huge amounts of data. You saw that with Google. There's these exponential scaling effects. It's not the algorithm anymore. You have so much more data, and that really boosts your accuracy in the system. So having GDPR will, in that sense, impede and hinder development of AI systems in Europe. But there's also an opportunity here, because maybe there are other fields where we can help in Europe, like developing systems that preserve privacy, that are secure, that allow you to do good machine learning even though you don't have access to all of that data. I think that's a business opportunity, and many people jump to that area currently. So maybe there's something to do even without breaking the privacy of entire populations.
Awesome. No, that's a very, very good point. I mean, I do have strong hopes. I mean, living in London and seeing all of the universities pushing through trying to get. I mean, there's the deep minds, there's the like a few players that are pushing the boundaries, but
DeepMind belongs to Google.
true. And I guess on the second point, something that I found very interesting was I was at this panel in the Amsterdam Privacy Conference this year, and one of the papers submitted was about it was called the social credit system in China, and the assumption was that they were gonna dissect it and pick it apart, but it was actually two Chinese speakers that were not only defending it but talking why it's so good. So that definitely is very interesting because it does show how there's a completely different philosophy and an approach in different parts of the world, and there is this humility that needs to come from this side of the world to say they may have something that we don't know, and let's have a look because they have access to all of the knowledge in English, right? But not vice versa. So I think from that perspective, before I jump on a macro level, I want to take it, one step back, and I think Karin, from your perspective, from managing like large set of databases or large set of data, what would be your take in some of the points that have been discussed, more specifically around Gdpr. And some of the best practices when approaching a big data problem to ensure that you can comply with this sort of regulations. What is your high level take on that and some of the discussion? Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's a hard question. So I'm not managing that many data. I'm looking into the technologies to do that.
Oh, cool.
So just to be clear on that side. But I think the first thing is to make sure that the technology has as much as possible security and regulation related features already built in to make sure that you can comply with these kind of regulations. So, and of course, from the perspective of a technology company who deals with a lot of data or provides a technology to deal with the data, the nearer these features are to the data, the better it is. Because if you have different access routes to the data and you just define the security at an endpoint, then you choose simply a different access route to get the data. So our take is to implement the features the nearest possible at the data.
Awesome. I totally agree. I think first, principle fundamentals are always very, very important, and especially with the technology that surrounds the data itself. And yeah, so I think now we're going to jump into the third topic. So people in the audience, start thinking of potential questions that you will want to ask, because we're going to open for questions. So I guess let's go from a macro level perspective. And let's discuss the potential impact on a citizen as well as potentially from a user level. And I guess more specifically, we were chatting about GDPR. And there are some areas on government data collection that may not require consent of gathering of your data. We may or may not know, but I would like to start with you, Gerd. What is your take on government gathering citizen data? And when do you think it's okay? When it's gone too far? And can this be defined, or is this something that it's too ambiguous?
Oh my God. Yeah. So first of all, this is me, Gerd. This is not the company Akamai that's speaking here, just to be clear.
Cool. Yeah.
I've got a lot of trouble with data gathering by countries or by governments in general. This may or may not be also because I'm German. I mean, we've in our history a situation where collected data was used against certain minorities of the population, and that was done in a very, very clever and well prepared way. And so my personal take is, I don't care if the government is democratic or not. There's some data that should not be in governmental hands, full stop. Thank you. I appreciate that. The main reason is we don't know what the next government is going to be. And this is also the reason why security and personal information always starts at the individual. And I cannot stand people that say, I've got nothing to hide. That's bullshit. I'm sorry to say that, it just is. And we have to think of what kind of information we're sharing. And it's us. It's not going to be a government. It's not going to be GDPR or anything else. It's going to be us who will be the people that save our own data. And I'm sorry to say that if you do say, I work in security and I feel that privacy is important, and you use WhatsApp on the same phone as you have all your addresses, you're doing something wrong. Apologies, but that's the way it is. And this is why sometimes we have to be, let's say, we have to pull our thumbs out and say, yes, it's very convenient, but we're not going to do it. And I can't say that I'm not also one of them. I mean, I use Google, not all the time. And I used to use WhatsApp. I stopped using WhatsApp when it was bought by Facebook, but that was just me taking a decision. And I'm not going to talk much longer, but in the end, what happened was that people told me, I can't reach you anymore. And I said, what? I've got a phone, I've got an email. You can also use Threema, I will be there. You can send me an SMS. You can just talk to me. You know, it works. It's fully analog. I'm sorry for that, but it does work. And I think we really have to really think about what kind of data we're sharing.
Awesome. So I guess
directly counter that a little bit to have some more heat in the panel.
Awesome. Yeah. Go on. Yeah, let's counter that. Yeah, go on.
So I agree with all of what you said, but why do you say, okay, stop using WhatsApp? I mean, it's not only WhatsApp. It's all of this. Yeah, it's all of this. The security researchers I know all own a smartphone, and it's kind of a contradiction in itself, right? Because there's no way you can protect yourself in meaningful ways to keep all of your data, to keep your privacy. The same as laptops. There's so much data collection going on. In particular, any websites have there's an entire system of hidden data collection. There's an interesting professor in Princeton who does just that, research in that area, how data is collected in secret ways on the web and used for marketing. And you see that the targeted ads along websites. And I think the answer is very easy. You use a computer or you use a smartphone, game over for privacy. It's that easy. Yeah? You can, okay, there are degrees to that level. Facebook makes it worse. WhatsApp makes it worse, but you use Google. So what? I mean, game over.
Awesome.
I really like the way you're thinking.
Let's pass the microphone to Anna because we need to.
I'm going to be finished in a sec. And yes, you're absolutely right. He says he's heating it up. He's absolutely correct there. The question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to give away your data for free? I mean, willingly, in all ways, or are you going to at least try to circumvent certain data collection? And I think it's if you do the latter, you're already one step further, because then regulation can kick in, and because you haven't given it away willingly. But yeah, I agree. It is privacy is a big problem there.
Awesome. All right, just on some of the points there, just really quickly. I think something that is worth taking is not the recommendation to go and build your own phones, but at the same time is not to just give the data to every single person that appears. And I completely agree with both points. Right now it has become a point of who to give the data and who can I avoid giving my data to. And I mean, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the initiative that Sir Tim Berners-Lee started with Solid and Inrupt, trying to separate application data from computation, from applications, which is still very, very far from it, but I guess it's those approaches of how to limit the access to personal data instead of just what am I going to use your data for versus what could the data be used for, and then just allowing the computation as opposed to the access to data. So I guess now passing it to Anna, I would like to hear your thoughts on potentially putting more fuel into the fire. Yes. Let's see.
Righto. I don't know if I'm going to add more fuel, but I think in this connotation or in the context of state surveillance, we've kind of like already lost that war. The data is there. The democratic and undemocratic systems have access to it. It starts at the most fundamental level, the pieces of hardware that we import from a variety of countries and have built into our very, very cheap applications where we don't know who they're actually talking to and what they're doing when they're calling home. And in that sense, I think the only way to counteract that or to work with it is within the scope of influence we have, is to try to foster a maximum degree of transparency with our government by basically creating the expectation that things in the dark don't happen. I don't know if many of you remember the discussions about a decade ago about the state Trojan in Germany, a very, very spooky concept. At the moment, I'm actually not quite sure if it exists or not, because it does. Thank you.
So what is that? I'm not aware.
The state Trojan is basically a Trojan, a backdoor, which was developed, I think the first working prototype was developed in Nordrhein-Westfalen by the police, with the objective basically to gain access and control over suspects or whatever computer to gain information. Mainly, I think the main trigger was to circumvent the whole encrypted messaging of Skype to basically have access to what the conversations that people were having. And it was initially limited to a counterterrorism activity, and it was then made a little bit more permeable in the sense that it was just for heavy criminal activities, which, by the way, I think can also include importing fake brands, counterfeit. Thank you. So it's something which is out there, which is not very transparent at all, and we have no knowledge of what it has, and it's really powerful because simply this piece of software is capable of pulling additional data in and manipulating what is on a person's laptop, and therefore basically destroying the whole process of data analysis afterwards in the context of a court case, for example.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And before we jump into questions from the crowd, I mean, Karin, what are your thoughts on this? And I guess would you agree more with one of the sides of the argument? Would you go towards the point that Gerhard mentioned, or what are your perspectives on this? Mm-hmm.
I think there has been said the most important things. Personally, I have the impression that we are far away from gaining control over where data is collected, what kind of devices are out there to collect data, where the data go to, and what kind of analysis is being done with the data. And I think it's getting worse every second. So imagine the clothes you wear, they are able to transmit or to collect data about you and transmit them somewhere. What we need is the transparency. Where is data collected? What kind of data? Where does the data go? And we have to make sure that we have influence on this, that we can decide purposely on what is being collected about ourselves. And then it doesn't matter whether it's a state office or a company, a private company which is collecting the data. This doesn't matter for me.
Awesome. All right, let's first see whether there's questions from the crowd, and we'll also introduce this discussion, which I think will still go for a while. But let's see some hands if you have any questions. So we have two. So let's have number one and then number two. So yes, let's go ahead. Oh yeah, just shout. Yeah. Got it. Okay, so I guess, would anyone in the panel want to answer this?
Well, first of all, I like, first, I understand where your idea is coming from. First of all, what you have to have is a certain trust that the government is going to use this information to the level that it is necessary. And that's a trust that I would say we might have in the European region. The question is, what do you do if you do business in China? And the Chinese government says, we need to see your code. Or the Russian government says, we need to have your keys. You know, that there is a question, how much trust do you have left in that situation? So as the idea sounds appealing, we live in an international world, so what appeals to us in Europe might be something that contradicts completely if we see it worldwide, because there is other interests that play into it. So, and as much as I like the idea to take a little bit of responsibility here and also say there needs to be regulation that's enforced, there's quite a few implications that will come after that. And to a certain extent, these things are happening. I mean, not really on the code level, but for example, when it comes to critical infrastructure, you know, nowadays in Germany, for example, UP Kritis, all the companies that have critical or are critical infrastructure need to show their resilience, that they can withstand certain situations in order to make sure that they will prevail if certain things happen. So there is this kind of check in other areas. So theoretically it's possible, but yet maybe this has to be looked into a little bit more.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any points?
Maybe just 2 sentences. I mean, it's an interesting idea. This already exists if you think about kitchens for restaurants or tax inspection, right? It's exactly the same model. And then it's sometimes balanced by the state, in particular for tax inspection. They don't want to have too much tax inspection because that will shoo away the industry, kind of your argument. But if you have like a tax inspector for each and every citizen, then no one will commit any tax crimes anymore. So, and then you have to balance that, kind of. And maybe one thing that comes to my mind, I didn't read the GDPR, but what I heard is that there's also this explainability aspect of algorithmic decisions that has to be there. So eventually we have to come to a situation where the outcomes and decisions of an algorithms have to be explained. We are far away from that because most of the machine learning algorithms are simply black boxes. Even the developers have no idea what the heck, why did it decide like that? So that has to be changed. And if eventually we are there and the machine learning algorithms are explainable, you can trace back how they got to the decision. That could be a very powerful tool to ask a company, how did you get to that decision? Which data was taken for that? And the inspector could use that very efficiently to understand, okay, which data did they use? And if the explanation says, oh, that was data they shouldn't have access to, they're in trouble. Just an idea.
Definitely. No, I completely agree. I mean, like that point on explainability, I mean, that's one of the core things that we focus on at the Institute. Awesome. So we had another question at the back. Yes. Awesome. I mean, Anna, do you wanna? Let's hear from Anna. Yeah.
I'm just coming in with also the very, very personal perspective. May have been a bit ahead of the curve here, but I never had WhatsApp. And the level of frustration I, on the other hand, feel realizing that my phone number was in the ether of WhatsApp anyway, because yes, all my friends uploaded their phone books there. That is, I think, a very disquieting aspect of data privacy, because it's no longer just me who has control over my data, but basically the people surrounding me are the ones that are opening my data to consumers that I'm not quite comfortable with.
Very good point.
Now, I might go a little bit too far out of my way here, but thank you for that idea. I mean, this idea, we had this idea of concatenating data to get new data sets that are no longer sort of anonymized. It's the same situation. Now, if I personally, the way I read GDPR, your phone number is your data set. So strictly speaking, WhatsApp has no right to that data. And you can actually ask them to delete it, even if you don't have WhatsApp, or especially then. So that might be something worth working on, you know, just basically saying, you have data that it does not belong to you, and I have never agreed on that. That's, I think, an idea worth following up to.
Awesome. Is there any more points? Yeah.
I think the better approach would be here to not even store your data if they don't come from yourself and you don't have agreed to that. So this should be actually the way to start with.
Totally agree.
But we're already long past that one, you know, so therefore we have to tell them, you know, you shouldn't have done that to start with. Yeah, that's right.
Awesome, awesome. All right, yeah, we have a question there at the back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, you got me that one. Honestly, this is, you see, this is the problem with the need to know principle. I mean, healthcare information, as you say, is very, very valid and absolutely important to have. And yet the question is, what do you do with the data? And then we're back at the situation, the government doesn't equal healthcare, you know? So does the governmental agency need or actually have the right to get that data in any way if your health insurance has it or your medical center has it? I mean, again, we have to either trust or distrust. That's our decision. We can't really control it, but we can be open and see and also hear people like from the Chaos Computer Club and other big affiliates that look after these kinds of data infringements, and then just cry out if it's going the wrong way. So yes, you're absolutely right, that is necessary, but then again, I think we still have to be absolutely open and listen to what's happening.
Awesome. All right, let's have some last thoughts.
Just to add on to that one there, I said earlier that I felt we already lost the war in giving governmental institutions our data or having them access that data. One of the important things we need to do, in my opinion, going forwards, is to ensure that there are as many walls around the individual data pools as possible, because the thing gets really frightening if suddenly all governmental and possibly non-governmental institutions start throwing in what they know about us together and connecting these dots, because then we really are transparent.
Awesome. All right. Well, I mean, we've run out of time. So just to wrap up, I thought there was do we have time for one more question? Yeah, I guess. Let's just go forward. Yep. Awesome. Yeah, all right. Let's take that one to the pub this evening. But yeah, so guys, just to wrap up, today we had a really, really good discussion on the impact of big data and artificial intelligence in the areas of privacy, regulation, and surveillance. You know, as we saw, it is a very, very complex set of topics, but definitely it's important to keep them, you know, exploring them and discussing them. So just to wrap up, let's give our panelists another massive round of applause.